Welcome back to PC Builder. I'm Jason. This is our best gaming CPU 2024 update for August. And oh my goodness, what is going on out there? Ryzen 9000 reviews are in. Some say it's amazing, others say it's trash. Which is it? We'll break them all down and tell you where we think it goes. We'll also talk about where we think the pricing on the 9600X and 9700X needs to be right now to make them actually competitive. And we'll break down the best gaming CPUs in terms of price and performance right now. Should you buy now or should you wait? If you get value out of this video, please give it a like as it makes a huge difference to the channel. And of course, subscribe for more cool PC content. With that, let's jump into it. This video is sponsored by VIP SCD Key. Say goodbye to crazy expensive Windows licenses and that terrible Activate Windows watermark. Right now, use the links in the video description, head over to VIP SCD Key and get a Windows 10 or 11 OEM license for a great price. Pick your product license, then use the PC Builder discount code PC25 for an additional 25% off. Go to the activation settings on your PC, put in the code, and boom! Windows is fully licensed for a crazy low price. And Windows 10 can be upgraded for free to Windows 11. And they have Microsoft Office licenses too. Use the links in the video description. Let's just jump straight to the news section because, oh my goodness, what is going on with Ryzen 9000 series CPUs out there? Reviews are in for the 9600X and the 9700X. Obviously, we're waiting for the 9900X and 9950X as I'm filming this right now. But looking at the reviews, depending on who you look at, this is either the most amazing thing that AMD has ever put out or it's the worst thing AMD has put out in a very long time, at least on the Ryzen side of things, right? We could go back to Bulldozer. Let's not go back to Bulldozer AMD. So what the heck is going on? Well, I think we just kind of take a step back and we take a look at Ryzen 9000 series CPUs. First, let's start with the pricing before we get to the performance on it. The pricing was higher than I anticipated. If you looked at our last CPU market update, I said really the highest I thought the 9600X should be is $249, but I wanted $229. And the highest that the 9700X should be is maybe like $329, given the fact that the 7800X 3D exists. So the pricing came in significantly higher than we thought, $279 for the 9600X and $359 for the 9700X. And while yes, technically that's less than the MSRP of the previous generation, those previous generation CPUs lasted at MSRP for 7 weeks. That's it, just 7 weeks before AMD massively slashed prices across the board because nobody was buying Ryzen 7000 series at the time. So I don't even want to get into a MSRP versus MSRP comparison because that MSRP for Ryzen 7000, at least the X series CPUs, is totally bogus. But let's also talk about the performance. Like, what the heck is going on? Why do we have some reviewers showing a 20% uplift over the previous generation and other reviewers showing at most like 5 to 10%? I'm gonna solidly come down in the 5 to 10% category out there. And again, depends on the game you're looking at. Depends on how well it takes advantage of certain things. In terms of the bigger numbers out there, from what it looks like, my at least cursory review of those reviews that are showing those bigger things is that they are listing numbers on their charts for overclock versions, so essentially precision boost overdrive and fast RAM kits on Ryzen 9000, and they're also listing the older generation CPUs, so Ryzen 7600X and the 7700s, particularly using stock RAM, and that's like 5200 stuff. That's not turning on precision boost overdrive. So I think that at least is probably contributing to part of that, but it's hard to say right now. I'm going to continue to do digging on that and I'll get back to you. Right now, though, I'm solidly in the camp that, yes, we're getting anywhere from 5 to 10% gaming performance in these CPUs at 1080p, right, with a high-end GPU. And the price does not seem necessarily to justify that. In fact, it probably does not. We will go through this later in the video. I'll put it in numbers for you, and then we'll see where these CPUs probably should be priced in order to actually be good values for consumers, and where I think AMD is going to go with them because that's what they did for Ryzen 7000 in very short order. In fact, let's just go ahead and take a look at a price graph for Ryzen 7600X. The 7600X, which initially launched at $299 MSRP, and again, I'm almost going to use air quotes because let's see how long it actually lasted there. It launched on September 28th right here. I would ignore these top two lines. I don't know what's going on there, but all the retailers are pretty much right here at $299. And it went and it went and went until what? Until, that's right, November 20th, when GameStop was the first to drop their price down to $249, and then everybody dropped their price down to $249, with Newegg going to $240. That's like a $50, almost $60 price cut, a $60 price cut on a $300 CPU. That's a 20% price cut within what, 7 weeks? That was basically AMD admitting a huge pricing mistake. And this didn't just happen with this series, the 7600X, it happened with all the X series CPUs. You could argue that then just about 2 months later in January, it got another $20 price cut when the 7600 non-X version came out at $229. So I think we're going to see something very similar with the 9600X, 9700X. I don't know about the higher core count CPUs. It really depends. Obviously, for those you're not talking about gaming performance, you're mostly interested in all that multi-threaded performance, and it could be with like the increased AVX 512 and those other things, that those end up being super performative in ways that, and kind of workloads that you just wouldn't use for a 9600X. Of course, the other two elephants in the room, if you're thinking about buying now or waiting, when are we going to get the Ryzen 9800X 3D? Now, the rumors are that we were going to get it in the fall, but also rumors say that we're going to get it CES next year, which is in January of 2025. And then, of course, looking at the data from Ryzen 9000 right now, are we going to get only a similar type of uplift on the 9800X 3D from the 7800X 3D, or is AMD going to be able to juice up this CPU more than Ryzen 9000 basically? And back in June, AMD did say, or did at least hint, that they were looking to do that with some improvements to the IHS in order to clock this up faster than X3D CPUs typically are able to be clocked up. We'll have to wait and see in terms of its overall performance. The other elephant in the room is Intel. When is Alder Lake going to launch? Given where Ryzen 9000 just came in, it really opens the door for Intel to retake the gaming crown, possibly retake the production crown, especially if their Alder Lake desktop CPUs, which are coming this year, are living up to the rumors, which are saying that performance is pretty good, the power usage is pretty good. Maybe this is a return to form for Intel right now that AMD has stumbled the way AMD took the crown when Intel stumbled earlier. Unfortunately for them, they just announced that they're canceling their Intel Innovation event. This is something they hold in September of every year. And this is basically where they typically announce their new CPU architectures, like 12th, 13th, 14th gen, so on and so forth. And when we were expecting an announcement for Alder Lake desktop CPUs, unfortunately, with this canceled and with Intel in some huge financial straits, that's why they're citing that they canceled it for the financial cost of it. I think that's probably not a great idea on their behalf. It does call into question when we're going to get those Alder Lake CPUs launched. Is it going to be announcement in September at a separate event, just not Intel Innovation, or is it going to kind of wait later in the fall? Let's jump into AMD Ryzen CPU pricing for August 2024, and we're going to focus mostly on the gaming CPUs here. Obviously, we're still waiting for the higher core count Ryzen 9000 series CPUs, so we're going to kind of table all the production stuff maybe till a couple weeks from now. But let's focus on the gaming CPUs. Before we do, look at all that red. Look at all that red out there. And what happened is what I told you was going to happen. AMD has largely stripped out kind of all the discounts that they price in through the retail process, through the retail chain out there, and they've ripped them away for the 7000 series CPUs, even for the 5000 series CPUs out there. The last time we took a look at prices in June, obviously we had Amazon Prime Day in between, and we did see some big discounts for Amazon Prime Day. Let's actually start there. What do we see on Amazon Prime Day? Well, look at that. The Ryzen 5600X was $114, and the Ryzen 5700X 3D was just $183. And I was pleading with some of you, take these deals if you're a budget PC builder, because I knew this was going to happen. Basically, those discounts are absolutely gone. The 5700X 3D, kind of actually a threat to the 9600X, because you can build a system pretty cheap with a 5700X 3D and DDR4. Yes, it doesn't have necessarily a future upgrade path the way the 9600X is, although are we going to get Zen 6 on AM5? Question mark. But you could certainly see that as a threat, and AMD's pumped the price of that CPU back up another, what is that, $26? Yikes. Meanwhile, if we take a look at the pricing of the 7600, it's gone back to $181. I will say just before the launch of Ryzen 9000, it almost got up to $200 again, almost got up to $200. However, all those bad reviews came out, and it was interesting to me. Immediately, we saw the price of 7600 drop. I'm not quite sure why that is. Maybe they're just not really expecting to sell that many 9600Xs, and they want to sell something in this quarter. They don't want it to be totally dry. But for Amazon Prime Day, look at that. $171 Ryzen 7600X. I believe this is over at Newegg in the US. Of course, we got the 9600, 9700X at their launch prices of $279 and $359 respectively. And the 7800X 3D, $365. Now, it had gotten all the way up to almost $400 just before the launch. However, recently, some CPU price cuts have come through, or I should say come back through, maybe again, it's AMD realizes maybe they're not going to sell that many 9700Xs at $359. Like, who would buy that thing right now? Versus the 7800X 3D. I'll also just point out the 7900 and 7900X can be had for $358 if you're mostly on the production front. Again, that's a 12-core CPU that crushes the 9700X in terms of its multi-threaded production. And it's actually $1 less. So what's going on? Let's quickly jump through Intel CPU pricing. We're not actually going to go through this in detail. We can see there's not a lot of variation there. 12400 continues to be amazing value. 12th gen CPUs seem to be good. But the statements I want to make here about 13th and 14th gen CPUs, because last time we made a statement, those CPUs that had been implicated only went down. I say only went down now to the i5-13600K and KF. But Intel recently made a statement saying that no, actually, this could go all the way down to include 65-watt TDP CPUs like the i5-13400 and 14400. My understanding was that those were 12600Ks that have been downclocked because they only have 4 E-cores on them. They're not Alder Lake architecture. Of course, it could have nothing to do with that. It could just have to do with the microcode and being overvolted as a result of whatever craziness is going on with the BIOS or whatever else is happening with those. So at this point, I would say just forget 13th and 14th gen CPUs even exist unless you own one right now. If you do own one, the BIOSes that supposedly are going to stop that behavior from degrading your CPU have just started rolling out. I would quickly update your BIOS to that, and I would keep checking back at least every week. I suspect we're going to see several of these get rolled out over time. Your CPU is already degraded. Intel gave a terrible answer, which is try and return the CPU because there's nothing you can do to fix it. Even the new BIOS won't fix the CPU. The silicon is degraded. It's garbage at this point. Try and return to Intel. Intel said, if we deny your RMA, then keep trying until we RMA it, which is the worst response ever. The correct response is, RMA that sucker, and we are going to ship you a new one as quick as we can. We're going to do what's called an advanced RMA, reship you a replacement before we get the old one from you. Of course, I can't control what Intel does, but that's my advice right now if you have one of those CPUs. And of course, do not buy 13th and 14th gen. Let's jump into the best gaming CPU 2024 in August. If you're not familiar with how we do this, we basically take all the CPUs that we've been tracking, we come up with a platform cost for them that includes the CPU, RAM, motherboard, and the cooler, and then we divide that by their performance, which is tied back to the Ryzen 5500, and we get a price to performance. Of course, there's a link to the spreadsheet down in the video description. You can jump in here, either change the prices if you're not in the US region, these are all US prices, or just change the configurations if you want different configurations. Let's just quickly zoom in here for the 9600X and 9700X. What I've done is I've gone with a 5% increase in gaming score over their previous generation counterparts, and a 10% increase in terms of multi-threaded production. If, of course, it turns out that this is just a BIOS problem and AMD gets more, we'll adjust those scores in the future for those things to reflect that. But right now, I think this is a pretty fair assessment of where Zen 5 actually is. And then finally, the other big change I've made is that we have gone with 32 gigs of RAM in terms of our pricing here. There's no longer a gaming and a production where gaming is 16 gigs. Frankly, the DDR5 kits that are available at the speeds we want them are all 32 gigs anyway, and it's only like another $15 for DDR4 kits. So given the fact that we've now seen some AAA titles recently where there is micro stuttering with 16 gigs of RAM, this is the direction we're going to go. Let's jump into the best budget gaming CPU 2024 in August. And remember, this is where the total platform price is less than $450. I continue to like the Ryzen 5500. However, as time goes on and more GPUs are introduced out there that really require PCIe Gen 4 in order to work properly because you're only using half the stupid connector, I'm starting to call into question the 5500. I really do like the i5-12400 and the Ryzen 5600, especially as the prices just have continued to crater out there. I'll say the only thing holding back the i5-12400, other than the Intel name on it right now, right? But 12th gen, absolutely fine to buy, at least we think it is the lack of good quality B660, B760 motherboards out there at a decent price. There's only one board, it's the ASRock B660M Pro RS. It's less than $100. I just don't know what's going on out there. That's why the Ryzen 5600 and 5600X is so easy for me to recommend. PCIe Gen 4, wide availability of great motherboards between $89 and $100 out there. And look at that, insane price to performance. But here's what I want to call your attention to. Look at the Ryzen 7600, 7600X. Look at it move up the stack. It didn't even used to make this list at all. And now all of a sudden it's kind of creeping up at almost one of the best budget gaming CPUs out there right now. Let's jump into the best mid-range gaming CPU 2024 in August. This is where the gaming score is 130 or greater. Total price of the platform is $750 or less. And you're going to see at the bottom where we're going to tell you what those Ryzen 9000 series CPUs are worth right now based on their price and performance vis-a-vis the previous generation. Look at the Ryzen 7600X. Insane price to performance, along with the 5700X3. Kind of surprising up there. $2.95 for the 7600, $3.05 for the 5700X 3D. And even though the 9600X comes in third, it's a distant third. $3.45 in terms of price to performance. And if that had the same price to performance as the 7600X, that CPU would only cost $190. $190. What is going on? Similarly with the 9700X, you can see it's just very terrible at the middle of the stack. There's tons of other CPUs in front of it, including the 7800X 3D. Totally embarrassing, by the way. Totally embarrassing. 7700X, way better price to performance. And that was a CPU that we were not recommending for gaming. We were saying get the 7600, invest that extra money into your GPU. I don't know why anyone would buy the 9700X, because again, you can even get the 7900X for less if you're doing multi-threaded stuff. So again, that CPU would need to be $282. So $282 for the 9700X in order to get the same price to performance as you're getting right now with the 7700. And generally, when we have a new generation come out, we want to see a better price to performance ratio. So this is just kind of the rock bottom. We're jumping over the best high performance gaming CPU in 2024 in August. So this is the gaming score is 160 or greater. And what do we see at the top of the list? Of course, the 7800X 3D for $365, just destroying all the competition. Of course, remember these Intel CPUs really just kind of placeholders right now. We're not recommending you actually build with them. I think I've already said that several times in the video. But the 7800X 3D on top, what CPU is missing here? The 9700X didn't even come close in terms of gaming performance. How embarrassing. Now, we didn't necessarily expect it to beat the 7800X 3D, but I'll be honest, I expected at least to kind of show up. It didn't even show up, especially for a CPU that you're basically charging the same price as the 7800X 3D. Who is that CPU for, AMD? Cut some prices out there. Stop being crazy. All right, before we play everyone's favorite game, right? One more note about in terms of the performance for Ryzen 9000. I know somebody in the comments is furiously typing, Jason, what about efficiency? Isn't the efficiency for Ryzen 9000 over the moon? Listen, man, I don't really care about the efficiency between the 9000 and the 7000 series. Those are already very, very efficient CPUs. It's like telling me, Jason, the new bottle, you used to get 50 miles a gallon of gas, and now you're getting 55. I'm like, well, I mean, thanks for 55. I appreciate it. But then if you're going to charge me a massive fee for my extra 5, like, why do I care now? Why do I care? I'm not getting any more performance. So I'm just, the efficiency arguments, at least for where I'm concerned, fall completely flat because you're already talking about CPUs that are plenty efficient. We don't need to push that needle anymore. We need the performance needle. Let's play everyone's favorite game. Should you buy now or should you wait? Well, let's just jump into it. Let's start off at the ultra high end. The only folks I could make an argument for waiting is if you have decided you were going to buy an RTX 5090 somehow, if you could even get stock of that thing when it actually comes out. And we're expecting that in January of next year, question mark, then I could see waiting for the 9800X 3D. I'm not expecting a huge uplift over 7800X 3D based on what we've seen. I could be wrong about that. AMD could pull some magic out of the hat. They've done it in the past. But those are the only folks where I can absolutely see you waiting. Honestly, though, I think you would be equally served just buying a 7800X 3D right now, getting that thing going, forget the 5090, get a great GPU from this generation and start your gaming. For those of you in more of the kind of mid-range and upper mid-range, there's honestly nothing to wait for in my estimation. Remember that 9800X 3D, they're probably gonna come out with some stupid $499 price or something, given how popular the 7800X 3D was. You'll probably also remove the discounts on the 7800X 3D once they're ready to launch that thing. So my advice is snap up a 7800X 3D or an insane value, Ryzen 7600 or 7600X right now. Those are great values. And again, I don't know what's going to go on with that pricing on that. I just know that it's good value right now, and when you see good value, you shouldn't wait, you should grab it. For those of you in the budget segment or the ultra budget segment, the interesting thing is the 7600X or 7600 is actually falling down into that budget category where it is making sense for some dollar builds out there. I think the last time we did it was like 900 was still good. And we're gonna see that line continue to fall and continue to fall as the DDR5 pricing has come down. SSD pricing has come back down, which is great because it had spiked up along with DDR5. A lot of other pricing has come down. PC cases have gotten super cheap again. I just see prices falling everywhere. It's a fantastic time to build, especially a budget gaming PC. But the Ryzen 5600 is right there. And you always have that upgrade. Heck, with $183 or even $190, I consider the 5700X 3D. If that gets you into the GPU that you're looking for and you're willing to forego that future upgrade path on that thing, it's super high performance, better than 9700X pretty much, which is almost double the price. So right now is a great time to build for budget PCs. If you got value out of this video, please give it a like. It makes a huge difference to the channel. And of course, subscribe for more cool PC content, and we'll catch you on the next one.